When Sansa Stark walked into that throne room wearing a black dress with her hair dyed dark, everyone watching knew something had changed. The girl who once dreamed of marrying a prince was gone. In her place stood someone who had learned to survive in the most brutal way possible. But here's what most people miss about Sansa's story. She didn't just survive. She learned. She adapted. She became the smartest person in the room without anyone even noticing. And by the end of Game of Thrones, while everyone else was fighting over the Iron Throne, Sansa Stark became queen in the North. Not through violence, not through dragons, but through something far more powerful: political intelligence. If you want to see more deep dives into Game of Thrones and understand the secrets behind your favorite characters, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We break down everything you missed in the show and the books. Now let's get into why Sansa had the best character development in the entire series. At the start of the series, Sansa was 11 years old in the books and 13 in the show. She was the perfect lady. She loved singing, sewing, and reading romantic stories about knights and princesses. She wanted everything to be proper and beautiful. When King Robert Baratheon arrived at Winterfell and her father Ned agreed to become Hand of the King, Sansa thought her dreams were coming true. She was going to marry Prince Joffrey and become queen one day. She would live in the capital, wear beautiful dresses, and have the life she always fantasized about. But there was a problem. Sansa was completely unprepared for reality. She saw the world through rose-colored glasses. When she attended the Hands tournament in King's Landing, she thought it was romantic and chivalrous. She developed a crush on Ser Loras Tyrell when he gave her a red rose. Everything seemed magical to her. But the first crack in her fantasy appeared when she witnessed the Mountain brutally kill another knight during the tournament. That should have been a warning. The world she was entering wasn't a song. It was dangerous. The worst part was what happened at the Trident. When Joffrey attacked the butcher's boy Micah and Arya's dire wolf Nymeria bid him to protect Arya, Sansa sided with Joffrey. She lied. She said she didn't remember what happened because she didn't want to upset her future husband. That decision had consequences. Queen Cersei demanded that a dire wolf die for the attack, and since Nymeria had run away, they killed Lady instead. Sansa's own dire wolf. Her father Ned had to do it himself. That moment was symbolic. Lady was gentle and trusting, just like Sansa. When Lady died, it represented Sansa losing her innocence and her connection to the North. In the books, Sansa even made a worse mistake. When Ned discovered the truth about Joffrey's parentage and told his daughters they were leaving King's Landing immediately, Sansa didn't want to go. She ran to Cersei and told her about Ned's plans to leave on a ship called the Wind Witch. She was begging to stay and marry Joffrey. She had no idea she was basically signing her father's death warrant. Cersei used that information to know exactly when to strike. The show removed this detail to make Sansa more sympathetic, but in the books, she played a direct role in Ned's downfall. She meant well, but her naivety had deadly consequences. Everything changed when King Robert died and Ned tried to expose Joffrey as illegitimate. Suddenly, Sansa went from future queen to hostage. Joffrey forced her to write a letter to her brother Robb, calling their father a traitor and begging him to bend the knee. The words weren't hers, but she had to say them. Then came the moment that destroyed her childhood forever. Joffrey made her watch as they executed her father. They cut off Ned Stark's head right in front of her eyes. And Sansa couldn't scream. She couldn't cry. She had to stand there and pretend to be grateful to Joffrey for his mercy. From that moment on, Sansa became a prisoner. During the second season, she endured Joffrey's sadistic abuse daily. He ordered his Kingsguard to beat her. He made her look at her father's head on a spike. He threatened to serve her Robb's head at his wedding. The only person who showed her any protection was the Hound, Sandor Clegane. Despite his rough exterior and scarred face, he treated her with a strange gentleness. He refused to beat her when Joffrey commanded it. And during the Battle of Blackwater, he offered to take her away from King's Landing. She said no, but that moment stayed with her. The Hound became one of the few people who ever showed her kindness when she had nothing. Cersei Lannister became an unexpected teacher during this time. While trapped together during the Battle of Blackwater, Cersei gave Sansa brutal lessons about power and survival. She told Sansa that love makes you weak, that tears are a woman's weapon, and that power is everything. Cersei said something that would echo through Sansa's entire journey. She told her the more people you love, the weaker you are. You'll do things for them that you know you shouldn't do. Those lessons were dark and cynical, but they were real. Sansa was learning how the game was actually played in King's Landing. When Tyrion Lannister arrived as Hand of the King, things improved slightly. He stopped the worst of the abuse. He forbade his men from stripping and beating Sansa publicly. But Sansa was still a prisoner. Then came another betrayal. The Tyrells, especially Margaery and her grandmother Olenna, befriended Sansa. They suggested marrying her to Willis Tyrell, Marjorie's brother who was kind and intelligent despite being crippled. For a moment, Sansa thought she might escape. She confided in them about how much of a monster Joffrey truly was. She begged Marjorie not to marry him, but Tywin Lannister found out about the plot. He immediately arranged for Sansa to marry Tyrion instead. That way, the Lannisters could control the north through Sansa, who everyone believed was the heir to Winterfell after Bran and Rickon supposedly died. The wedding was humiliating. Sansa was taller than Tyrion, and when it came time for him to place the cloak around her shoulders, he couldn't reach. Joffrey, who was there watching, made it worse by removing the stool Tyrion tried to use. But Tyrion was different from his family. He treated Sansa with respect. He never forced himself on her. They developed a strange mutual understanding, even though neither wanted the marriage. Sansa learned that not all Lannisters were evil. Some were trapped in the game just like her. Sansa's escape from King's Landing came during Joffrey's wedding to Marjorie. When Joffrey was poisoned at the feast, Ser Dontos, a disgraced knight, helped Sansa flee, but Dontos was actually working for Littlefinger, Peter Baelish. On the ship leaving King's Landing, Littlefinger revealed he had been behind everything. He had orchestrated Joffrey's death and Sansa's escape. Then he killed Dontos right in front of her. Sansa realized she had traded one prison for another. Littlefinger took Sansa to the Vale, where her auntie, Lysa Arryn, ruled. But Lysa was unstable and jealous. She had been in love with Littlefinger since they were children, and when she saw him kiss Sansa, she went mad. Lysa dragged Sansa to the Moon Door, a hole in the floor that drops hundreds of feet down the mountain, threatening to push her through. That's when Littlefinger intervened. But not to defend Sansa. He pushed Lysa through the Moon Door himself, declaring he had only ever loved Catelyn Stark. Sansa had to lie to protect Littlefinger afterward. She told the Lords of the Vale that Lysa had committed suicide. This was a turning point. Sansa chose to lie convincingly to save herself. She was learning to manipulate the truth. Littlefinger noticed. He began teaching her his own twisted lessons about power. He told her chaos is a ladder. That everyone has desires and you can use those desires against them. He taught her a game where you assume the worst about people's motivations to understand what they really want. These lessons were dark, but they were valuable. Sansa was becoming a student of manipulation. Then came one of the most controversial storylines in the entire show. In the books, Sansa stays in the Vale disguised as Elaine Stone, Littlefinger's bastard daughter. She remains there, learning to navigate politics and serve as the unofficial Lady of the Eyrie. But the show changed this. The show merged Sansa's storyline with that of Jane Poole, a minor character who in the books is forced to marry Ramsay Bolton while pretending to be Arya Stark. Littlefinger convinced Sansa to marry Ramsay Bolton to reclaim Winterfell. He told her it was her chance to avenge her family and take back her home. Sansa agreed, thinking she could handle it. But she had no idea what Ramsay truly was. Ramsay Bolton was a sadistic psychopath who enjoyed torture and murder. From the moment they were married, he brutalized Sansa physically and psychologically. He raped her. He beat her. He used her to legitimize the Bolton claim to Winterfell. It was the darkest period of her entire life. But here's what's important to understand. Sansa didn't break. Instead, she quietly observed everything. She watched how Ramsay thought, how he manipulated people, what made him tick. She learned his weaknesses. When Theon Greyjoy, who Ramsay had tortured into becoming Reek, showed signs of his old self, Sansa seized the opportunity. Together, they escaped Winterfell by jumping from the castle walls into the snow. After escaping, Sansa made her way to Castle Black where she reunited with Jon Snow. It was an emotional reunion. The Stark children were finally coming back together. Sansa told Jon they needed to retake Winterfell. Jon didn't want to fight anymore after being killed and resurrected, but Sansa convinced him. She knew Ramsay had to be stopped. They needed to rally the northern houses to their cause. During the preparations for the battle, Sansa proved she understood strategy better than Jon. She warned him not to do what Ramsay wanted. She told him Ramsay was a master manipulator who would try to bait him into making mistakes. Jon insisted he understood. But when the battle started and Ramsay executed their little brother Rickon right in front of them, Jon did exactly what Sansa warned against. He charged forward in rage, nearly getting himself and his entire army killed. The Battle of the Bastards would have been lost if not for Sansa. She had secretly sent a message to Littlefinger, calling for the Knights of the Vale to come help them. When Jon's forces were surrounded and about to be massacred, the Vale cavalry arrived at the last moment and destroyed Ramsay's army. Sansa had saved the day through political maneuvering, not through swordplay. After the battle, Sansa got her revenge. She trapped Ramsay in the kennels with his own hounds, who he had kept starved. As Ramsay boasted that he was part of her now and always would be, Sansa delivered the perfect line. She told him his house would disappear and his name would be forgotten. Then she walked away while his own dogs ate him alive. It was cold, calculated, and exactly what he deserved. Sansa had learned that sometimes justice requires ruthlessness. After retaking Winterfell, the Northern Lords declared Jon Snow the king in the north. This frustrated Sansa. She had done just as much work as Jon, if not more. She had secured the Knights of the Vale. She had planned the battle strategy. But the Lords chose Jon because he was a man and had fought on the battlefield. Jon himself didn't even want the title. He turned to Sansa and acknowledged that she deserved it more. But the damage was done. Sansa had to navigate a difficult situation. She supported Jon publicly while disagreeing with him privately. When Jon decided to leave the north to meet with Daenerys Targaryen, Sansa thought it was a mistake. She warned him not to abandon his post. She told him not to trust Cersei. She reminded him that both Robb and Ned had made mistakes by being too honorable. She had learned from their failures. They trusted the wrong people and it got them killed. Sansa wasn't going to repeat those errors. Her biggest test came when Littlefinger tried to turn her against Arya. After Arya returned to Winterfell, Littlefinger planted evidence to make Sansa think Arya was plotting against her. He showed her the letter Cersei forced Sansa to write years ago, calling Robb a traitor. He suggested Arya might want to execute her and become Lady of Winterfell herself. But Sansa had learned too much. She had studied at what people jokingly call the Cersei Institute for Deceit and the Littlefinger School of Manipulation. She knew Littlefinger's tricks. In one of the most satisfying scenes in the series, Sansa called a trial in the Great Hall. Everyone thought she was putting Arya on trial. But when Sansa said, "You stand accused of murder and treason," she turned and looked directly at Littlefinger. She listed every crime he had committed: betraying Ned Stark, lying to Lisa, selling Sansa to the Boltons. Littlefinger tried to manipulate his way out, but Sansa used his own game against him. She asked him to assume the worst. What was the worst reason he would have for turning her against Arya? The answer was obvious. He wanted to divide the Stark family so he could control them. When Littlefinger begged for mercy and said he loved her, Sansa gave him the most brutal response possible. She thanked him for all his lessons. Then Arya cut his throat. Sansa had passed judgment. She had learned from everyone who tried to use her and turned that knowledge against them. When the final season arrived, Sansa was essentially running the north. Jon had gone south to fight for Daenerys. Sansa stayed in Winterfell, managing resources and preparing for winter. When Daenerys arrived with her armies and dragons, Sansa immediately distrusted her. Everyone else was charmed by the Dragon Queen, but Sansa saw through it. She questioned Daenerys's motives. She asked what would happen to northern independence after Daenerys took the Iron Throne. These were the right questions that no one else was asking. During the Great Council at the end of the series, when the lords and ladies of Westeros gathered to decide the future of the realm, they chose Bran Stark to be king. But Sansa stood up and made a declaration. She said the North had sacrificed too much to remain part of the Seven Kingdoms. The North would be independent. Bran agreed. He became king of the Six Kingdoms, and Sansa became queen in the North. This ending was perfect for multiple reasons. First, it honored Sansa's entire journey. She had been a hostage, a prisoner, a victim, and a survivor. She had learned from every single person who tried to break her. From Cersei, she learned what not to do as a ruler. From Littlefinger, she learned how to read people's true motivations. From Ramsay, she learned that sometimes you have to be ruthless to defeat evil. From Tyrion, she learned that kindness and intelligence matter. From her father Ned, she learned about honor and justice. Second, Sansa became queen not through violence or birthright alone, but through political intelligence. She didn't have dragons like Daenerys. She didn't have supernatural powers like Bran. She wasn't a skilled warrior like Arya or Jon. What she had was her mind. She had become the smartest person in any room she entered. She knew how to negotiate, how to read people, how to make alliances, and how to rule with both compassion and strength. An academic article from the University of Oxford pointed out something fascinating. The article argued that Game of Thrones ultimately favored leadership styles that were collaborative and strategic rather than militaristic and authoritarian. Sansa's approach to leadership was policy-driven and focused on caring for her people, not ruling through fear. This contrasted sharply with Cersei and Daenerys, who both relied on violence and force. They both fell because of it. Sansa survived and thrived because she understood that true power comes from winning hearts and minds, not just battles. It's important to note that George R.R. Martin, the author of the books, originally planned to kill Sansa. In an interview, he admitted he was going to have her die, but Sophie Turner's portrayal of the character in the show was so compelling that he might let her live in the books. That's how good her arc became. The show gave Sansa a story that was darker than the books in some ways, especially with the Ramsay storyline, but it also gave her a more complete transformation. In the books, Sansa is still in the Vale as of the last published novel. She's disguised as Elaine Stone and learning to play the political game under Littlefinger's tutelage. She's starting to show signs of becoming more strategic and cunning. For example, she suggests holding a tournament that would allow her to meet potential suitors and political allies. She's taking initiative and thinking several steps ahead. But we haven't seen her full transformation yet because the books aren't finished. The show accelerated her development and put her through more extreme trials. The controversy over the Ramsay storyline was significant. Many viewers and critics felt that the show used sexual violence as a plot device to make Sansa stronger, which is a problematic trope. The show suggested that without Littlefinger and Ramsay, Sansa would have stayed a little bird forever. But that's not entirely fair. Sansa's survival instincts and intelligence were always there. The trauma didn't create her strength, it revealed it. What made Sansa's arc so powerful was that she maintained her compassion throughout everything. She didn't become cruel like Cersei or cold like Littlefinger. She remained kind. When Sandor Clegane, the Hound, came back to Winterfell, he called her a stupid little bird. She corrected him. She told him that all those horrible experiences had taught her lessons, but she didn't thank her abusers for them. She simply acknowledged that she had learned. That's an important distinction. She didn't glorify the abuse. She recognized that she survived it and grew despite it, not because of it. Sansa Stark's character arc teaches us several important lessons. First, adaptability is crucial. Sansa went from a sheltered girl who knew nothing about politics to a queen who understood power better than almost anyone. She adapted to each new situation she found herself in. When she was a hostage, she learned courtesy as armor. When she was with Littlefinger, she learned manipulation. When she was with Ramsay, she learned ruthlessness. Each experience added to her skill set. Second, observation is a powerful tool. Sansa spent most of her time in Game of Thrones watching and listening. She wasn't the one swinging swords or commanding armies. She was the one noticing how people behaved, what motivated them, and what their weaknesses were. By the end of the series, she could read a situation better than almost anyone because she had been paying attention the whole time. Third, staying true to your core values matters. Despite everything she went through, Sansa remained fundamentally good. She cared about her people. She wanted justice, not just revenge. She valued family and loyalty. When she finally had power, she didn't abuse it the way her enemies had. She used it to protect the North and secure its independence. That's what separated her from villains like Cersei who were consumed by their desire for power. Fourth, intelligence is just as valuable as physical strength. Game of Thrones was full of warriors and fighters. But in the end, the survivors were the ones who knew how to think strategically. Sansa proved that you don't need a sword or a dragon to win the Game of Thrones. You need a sharp mind and the ability to outthink your opponents. So why was Sansa's character arc the best in Game of Thrones? Because it was the most complete transformation. She went from the most naive character to the most politically savvy. She suffered more than almost anyone else in the series, but she never became a villain. She learned from her enemies without becoming them. She maintained her humanity while mastering the Game of Thrones. Other characters had great arcs too. Jon Snow went from bastard to king in the north to the person who killed Daenerys to save the realm. Arya went from a girl to a faceless assassin to the person who killed the Night King. Daenerys went from an abused child bride to the mother of dragons to the Mad Queen. But Sansa's arc felt the most earned. Every step of her journey built logically on the previous one. Every lesson she learned came from concrete experiences. Her transformation wasn't sudden or magical. It was gradual and realistic. The ending of Game of Thrones was controversial for many reasons. People argued about Daenerys's turn to madness, about Bran becoming king, about Jon's exile. But almost everyone agreed that Sansa's ending made perfect sense. She deserved to be queen in the north. She had fought for it, suffered for it, and earned it through her intelligence and determination. When we see Sansa crowned queen in the north in the final episode, wearing a gown with direwolves embroidered on it, sitting on the throne with the northern lords chanting, "The Queen in the North," it feels right. This was her destiny all along. Not to marry a prince and become queen through marriage, like she dreamed as a child. But to become a queen in her own right, ruling her own kingdom, protecting her own people. The North finally had a Stark in Winterfell again. And not just any Stark. A Stark who understood the Game of Thrones better than anyone. A Stark who would never let the North be subjugated again. A Stark who combined her father's honor, her mother's political instincts, and the hard lessons she learned from every enemy she ever faced. Sansa Stark became the leader the North needed. She became the player who won the game not through violence, but through wisdom. And that's why her character arc was the best in Game of Thrones. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Sansa Stark's journey, make sure you hit that like button. Drop a comment and let me know which Game of Thrones character you think had the best arc. Was it Sansa? Was it someone else? And don't forget to subscribe for more Game of Thrones content, because we're just getting started with the secrets and hidden details of this incredible series. The Game of Thrones may be over, but there's still so much to unpack and analyze. Until next time, thanks for watching.